Normally you can walk up to the exterior walls. Right now they're obscured by construction fencing, but the walls of the structure are embedded with about 160 different stones from famous places all around the world. They're from places like the Taj Mahal, the Parthenon, the Colosseum, the Great Wall of China. Tribune reporters would go around the world to do stories, and then they would simply steal pieces of historic structures. That's illegal. I'll tell you about the white buildings towards the end of the tour. Instead, now I'll skip ahead to the tall steel and glass skyscraper ahead to the right. Built in 2009, it's the second tallest building in the city. It's designed by an architect that's sometimes called a star architect. That's a star architect. His name is Adrian Smith, along with his partner Gordon Gill. Most importantly, this building is the building that was used for the last scenes in the movie The Dark Knight. If you saw that movie, you might remember it ends with the Joker and Batman fighting each other in a partially constructed high-rise. That was this building before it was done. Let's move on. Next to the right, you'll see a simple black steel and glass box. Looks simple. It's actually an architectural masterpiece designed by a world-famous architect named Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. It's in the style he pioneered called the modernist style. If you're not an architect, or just if you don't like boxy buildings, you probably won't like the modernist style. I certainly don't find it that attractive. Even Mies van der Rohe described the style with the ethos, less is more. After decades of buildings that look just like that, architects responded by saying, less is a bore. I kind of agree, but this was a very important style to architecture in the 20th century. I'll show you how you can see it for yourself. Look at that black building and then compare it to the one we just passed on the right. You'll see a lot of similarities. That's because the black building, or at least that modernist style, was the precursor of a lot of today's most modern skyscrapers. Modernism is often a steel and glass box like that, but it can also be the exact opposite of that, concrete and round, which leads us to the next buildings on the right. These modernist towers were done in 1964 and 67. They're some of the best known buildings among Chicagoans. They're called Marina City, built in 1964 and 67. As I said, they were designed by a guy named Bertrand Goldberg, and you can see why they're called Marina City as they reappear. There's a marina at the bottom, but Chicagoans sometimes refer to the buildings by their nickname. That would be the Corn Cob Towers, due to their obvious resemblance to tomatoes. The buildings are also called Marina City because they were a city within a city when they were built in the 60s. Certainly they have a lot of amenities today, but they had even more in the 60s. That's why they were called that. I'll give you an overview of what they had access to in the 60s. Not only did the residents have access to this marina and 13 floors of parking per building, they also had a bank, a dry cleaners, a grocery store, a movie theater, a bowling alley, a health club, a swimming pool, and on one of the floors they had their own ice skating rink. The ice skating rink lasted up until the 1990s, when it had to be closed after somebody tragically skated over the edge of the structure. I'm just kidding. Oh man, I think I've lost you for the tour. Just checking to see if you're still paying attention. They did have an ice skating rink, that part is true. I'm not sure why it closed. Somebody may have skated over the edge. Next on the right, we've got the home of the American Bar Association Tower. You'll notice in the front of it, there is a restaurant. I'll point this out because it's interesting. The building's restaurant just opened about a month ago after 2 years of construction. I find that interesting because before the construction, what you would have found here was a restaurant. It took 2 years to make a restaurant into a restaurant. For comparison's sake, the Empire State Building was done 90 years ago and built from scratch in 1 year. I think it would be hilarious if that restaurant closed in 6 months. Next on the right, the oldest building on the main branch of the river, built in 1914. So if you're from Europe, this is a new building. This is called the Reed Murdoch Center, and it gives you an idea of what our river's architecture used to look like back when we were a big industrial city. That's because this building is one of just 2 of the last remaining old warehouse buildings on the main branch of the river. It's no longer home to an actual warehouse, it's now office space, but our river used to be lined with buildings that look just like this, pretty much all brick and right up to the river's edge. Another office building is next on the right. After the bridge, you'll see a tall, modern green glass skyscraper built in 2009. The building's green color is kind of appropriate. The building has earned the highest possible environmental friendliness designation. If it means anything to you, the building is LEED Platinum certified. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Platinum is the highest rating you can get. It's hard to get. This building's environmentally friendly in 3 big ways. It was built of almost all recycled materials. You'll also find a rooftop garden on the top, and the building has a system that takes in the water from the Chicago River, uses that water to create cool air for the building's air conditioning. a very innovative process in 2009. Today, that process is illegal. You're wondering why? It's because the water comes back into the river hotter than when it went into the building in the first place. That interferes with the river's ecosystem. Also, the building system sucks up fish from the river like a fish vacuum. Now on the right, you can see a hulking structure. Hard to miss this building. This was the largest building in the world when it was built in 1931. It's called the Merchandise Mart, and it's still pretty big today, although it's not even in the top 50 world's largest buildings anymore. The building has 4 million square feet of space. Hard to wrap your head around how big that is, so I'll tell you that the Sears Tower, our tallest building, has the same square footage as this building. So this building basically is the Sears Tower. If you smashed it down and spread it out over 2 entire city blocks, that's a 5-acre footprint. It's so large it even had its own zip code up until 2008. This is the other one of the 2 remaining old warehouses on the Chicago River. She has had enough to drink today. This building was originally the Marshall Field Warehouse. It wasn't the Marshall Field Warehouse for long, but I'll say that that's why you have these giant pest dispensers, as David Letterman called them, right here on the Riverwalk. Those honor a lot of the nation's best-known former retailers. Frank Woolworth, Montgomery Ward, of course, Marshall Field, many others. It was not the Marshall Field Warehouse for long, as I mentioned. It was only about 10 years. Then the Marshall Field Company had to sell it, and it eventually got bought by the Kennedy family. The Kennedys bought the building in 1945 for $13 million in back taxes, and then sold it about 50 years later for a little over $500 million. Good for them. I'm sure they needed that. The Kennedys no longer own the building, but they do own this land to the right. This is where there was a parking lot for decades, a single level outdoor parking lot. Now, obviously, home construction, the Kennedys have decided to develop it. There will be another building here in about 10 years, about 800 feet tall. A lot of the buildings here in this conference have been constructed the last few years, but I'll point out the coolest building in the city, perhaps, is the building ahead to the right in Captain Ave Bridge with the narrow base. Pretty impressive. The architects that designed the building have never played the game of Jenga. The widest part of that building's base is only 7 feet wider than this boat, 40 feet wide, and it's 800 feet tall. It should have a problem with swaying because of that narrow base. It does not because of what's on the top floor of the building. Up there is a 160,000-gallon pool of water.
Changes to the Riverwalk. For example, overhanging the Riverwalk here to the right, behind these white umbrellas, you can see there's a large dark glass box. That was added last fall, and now every night for 2 hours, it projects various art onto the face of the Merchandise Mart to your left. It's called Art on the Mart, and it's pretty cool. It starts at about 8. Nothing. Nobody, and I mean nobody, used the Riverwalk in this previous form for lots of reasons. For one, the old Riverwalk is narrow. It's only about half as wide as this boat. It was also boring and unattractive, like most of my exes, and it was really inconvenient. Every time you walked along a section and you got to a bridge, you could still see them. You had to stop, go up a staircase, cross a busy street, go down a staircase, all to get back to boring nothingness. No one used it. Now you can see it's way more popular because it's wider. Each bridgeway has a different design, and now we've got bridge underpasses, so you've got a flat path from one end to the other. This was all paid for, by the way, with a $100 million loan Chicago cannot pay back. Crushing debt for your grandkids. Very exciting. Next on the right, where you got the coolest part of the Riverwalk. This is called the River Theater. This is also where the most tragic event in Chicago history occurred. It was here in this water that a ship was docked one day in the summer of 1915. The ship was called the Eastland. It was boarding about 2,500 passengers for a day trip across the lake when the boat, which was notoriously top-heavy, tipped over in the Chicago River right there. 844 people drowned that day. Old women and children died in that disaster. Then in 19 Titanic, 2 years prior, the third deadliest shipping disaster in U.S. history. was founded in Chicago in the 1930s. Since then, they've become one of the best-known advertising firms in the country. They've created some of the world's best-known advertising mascots. Among others, they created the Marlboro Man, the Hillsborough Doughboy, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, the State Farm Man, the California Giant, and many others. Also, some powerful voices for the character Don Draper in Mad Men.
Now looking ahead of us, one of the most stunning buildings on the tour, in my opinion. Look straight ahead, then go a few degrees to the right for a building with a gleaming top. That top shines so brightly atop that narrow dark green neck because the top of that building is 24-karat gold leaf. That is the carbide and carbon building. You can see how brightly it shines. It almost looks like it's on fire. That's 24-karat gold leaf up there atop the dark green terracotta base. It was built in 1929 and supposedly designed to look like a champagne bottle that had just been uncorked. I think they nailed it. That was done by the sons of Daniel Burnham. Now a building with a connection to our most infamous gangster, Al Capone. Not much in Chicago has a connection to him these days. You can see something right now. Look at the bottom of this plaza on your right at eye level. Go to the building right behind the fountain with the flagpoles. You're looking at a tan structure with a round section at the very top up there. That round section up there once housed an illegal bar, a speakeasy that Capone was known to frequent during the Prohibition years. It would later be called the Stratosphere Lounge. That is the Jewelers Building from 1926, now called 35 West Wacker. The last building on the tour, the two beautiful white terracotta buildings ahead of us, are the Wrigley Buildings, built in 1924. You were standing right next to them as you waited to board the tour, seemingly yesterday. Those two buildings, built in 1924, have been some of the best-loved buildings among Chicagoans. Well-loved for two big reasons I can think of. First of all, they've always been gleaming bright white buildings, day or night. They never got dirty because the outside is covered with a glazed terracotta, so dirt or soot would rarely stick. And also, they've always been lit up at night in the surrounding areas by spotlights every night, except for the years of World War II. The buildings are also well-loved because of their namesake, which is, of course, the Chicago-founded Wrigley Gum Company. Sadly, the Wrigley Buildings are Wrigley in name only. Wrigley left the buildings 8 years ago after they sold them for a surprisingly low $33 million, especially surprising because last year the buildings sold again, this time for $255 million.